Hello everyone, this is a video about my 2025 entry to the Cheap Bike Build-Off Challenge, started by Mullet Mechanic on YouTube and Instagram. And it's a challenge to build a $150 / 120 pound bike using local parts and not using anything from AliExpress. So you're mostly looking at eBay, Facebook Marketplace, and your local bike shop, bike co-op to build up a bike that's as cool as possible. I know so far my channel has been mostly about Brompton content, but it's nice to work on something different once in a while. And stuff like designing the Friction Brifter or even just the brake lever hoods is a good exercise in designing something different. So the bike itself is a 1980s Dawes Galaxy steel touring bike. This type of bike from this era is quite desirable because it has cantilever brakes and tire clearance for quite wide tires, so these can fit about 35mm tires. It also has a Reynolds 531 ST tubing, and I weighed the frame. It was actually quite light. My scale showed around 2.5 kilograms, but that included the bottom bracket that I didn't take out and the headset cups.
Even before the Cheap Bike Build-Off Challenge, I was thinking about doing a retro full-size steel bike build to see what kind of frame size and geometry that I liked. I was thinking about actually doing like a full custom build, either ordering the frame or maybe even designing my frame and doing some welding, but that's kind of a bit far out at this point. So getting a cheap kind of steel bike build would be good to figure out the geometry that I'd like before committing to an actual custom build. This is the parts list, and you can pause here if you want to take a look at the numbers in more detail. This is the eBay listing. They listed for 80 pounds and I made an offer for 60 pounds and he accepted, so I went to go pick it up. Picked this up for 60 pounds on eBay. .531 Super Tourist Reynolds tubing. Down tube shifters. I think there's a dent here, but it should be fine, right? Not mistaken. Maybe an alignment issue. But the tires are in good condition. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 speed. And I rolled this back. Brakes are a bit sketchy, but got me home. It shifted fine, but when I took a closer look at the parts, both the derailleurs were pretty crap. Need a lot of polishing to make it look good. The cranks were also stamped steel, and some of the plastic coverings were cracked, so I decided to just change that out. But actually, I did like the gearing more on those old cranks. I think it was something like a 48-38. The strong light cranks I have are nice, but the 52-42 tooth chain rings that I have on these are not really suitable for a touring bike, I think. And yeah, originally when I bought the Shimano XT rear derailleur, it also came with a front derailleur, but that was like a mountain bike set, and it did not work with the 52 tooth chain ring, so I had to get a Shimano 600 front derailleur. So that took up a bit of the budget, and I mean, most of the other stuff was just kind of maintenance, cables, chains. Yeah, and I didn't really factor in the copper costs for the front rack because it was pretty much scrap. So I know copper piping, copper itself is definitely valuable, but yeah. So that pretty much covers the kind of boring parts I swapped out. But I'll go over kind of the more interesting parts of the build, which is moving the friction shifters to the brake levers, so to make friction brifters. For those that don't know, brifters are just brake levers and shifters, so brake brifters. And then I'll talk about the copper rack later on as well. Obviously, I didn't invent the idea of friction brifters, but I knew they existed from companies like Grotac and Gevinal. And I was looking at all these retro steel bikes that had the down tube shifters, so it just kind of made sense to bring that idea to this kind of build. And then, yeah, the first thing I did was actually just try to Google to see if someone has done it before, and someone has. This is a company called Hufla. I think they're a Belgian frame builder, and they made this 3D model, which is printable, but probably only for prototyping purposes, since they do sell a CNC aluminum version. So if you print it out of something stiff like PETG ABS, I'm pretty sure it'll break pretty quickly. And lately I've been printing a lot of stuff out of TPU and just experimenting with all the different types of hardnesses that the material comes in. And unlike other kind of 3D printable plastic, the layer adhesion is amazing on this, and since it also doesn't shatter or break in that kind of way, it just felt like a really good material to use for this purpose. And so I immediately knew I wanted to make mine out of TPU, and so I proceeded to make a model based on Hofla's design. I'll just play a few clips of the process of assembling and prototyping the shifters. So I will be putting this 3D printed adapter thing onto these brakes so I can have shifters. I have an M3 tap, so I plan to use M3 bolts, and that calls for a 2.5 millimeter drill bit. Okay, one down. I guess even if I screw this up, I don't really need to buy new shifters. It just weight reduction. Drillium, right? A tap. Probably best to do this with a vise. Should I lubricate it? Maybe I should lubricate it. Probably shouldn't be doing this on the dinner mat, but let's see. Yeah, fun. There's some bike lube. Great. Oh, light died. Got some M3. And here's the shifter. I mean, that works. But I feel like as long as you can shift, like once I have the cable tension in it, I'll also get a better idea as well. Actually, this part's a bit maybe sharp. But, I mean, seems to work quite well. I mean, you gotta get on the hoods to really get a feel for it. Anyways, I just did the other one off camera as well. So yeah, that's how they look. Anyways, that's what they look like. Small update, already changing it up. I think this is functional. The only issue is that if you push here, it would flex. But realistically, I don't think you're ever really pushing in this spot. But essentially, I decided I'll just remove this bolt and put up an M5 all the way through. Shift this all down so the M5 just tap it into this part of the lever. Luckily, the previous bolts don't interfere with anything, so there's enough room. I'll just shift this all down. This is the new design. Yeah, not much to it, I guess. Made this a bit thinner. Removed one bolt because I don't think it's necessary for two. So this is the design that's printed out from the previous model I showed. As you can see, there's still flex. It like pulls this over, so this should be, oh god, focus. So yeah, you can see from here, this should be more to this side, so straighter. What I can do is actually modify the model a bit so that it kind of sits more closely onto this metal part, and then it definitely won't flex. But the more you kind of adjust it to fit this specific shifter, the less universal it is. So I might just release it as is, because right now it actually works fine. Like when you release the tension, since this has kind of like a memory of the material, so like it won't shift, it won't flex back. So you won't really have too much play in the mechanism. So it does pull it a bit, but I mean it's friction shifting with no indexing, so the actual it doesn't really go out of alignment. Yeah, and as I said previously, this bolt is an M5 and it goes directly through to the shifter in there. And yeah, before I release the model, I'll just make this a bit cleaner so that if it pulls it, it won't interfere with the hood as much. But yeah, I mean, it actually works quite well. It works.
This is a test ride I did before I fit the new front derailleur and all the bar tape. So the way it works is that when you pull it outwards, it'll release tension on the derailleur, which shifts the derailleur outwards, dropping you into the highest gear, so the harder gear. And when you push back, it'll, slowly bring you up to the low gears. So yeah, that's the Friction Brifters. I also added these handlebar grips in the drops that I've seen before, and they're actually pretty comfortable. They were just leftover handlebar grips meant for flat bars that I printed previously. Okay, next let's talk about the rack. So this rack was made of copper that I had left over, and it's just welded using like a regular torch you would use for fitting plumbing, essentially. And I'll show some clips and pictures of the process of making it, but it started out with just a sketchbook sketch, so I didn't really use any measurements, so it came out kind of bigger than I expected. For the curved sections, it was a 10mm copper tubing that's normally used for radiators, and you can bend it by just filling with salt, and that'll prevent it from kinking when you do harder bends, and you can kind of work hard in it by slightly tapping or hammering it. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos from frame builders, so I've just followed the similar idea of just cutting and filing the tubes to the right profile. And yeah, I've only really done copper soldering once before, just for actual plumbing, but in that case you're kind of sweating where the heat kind of draws in the solder. It's kind of different from what I'm doing here, which is like almost like fillet brazing with solder, which definitely isn't what you're supposed to do. So I think the weakest point of this rack will definitely be the solder joints. The actual copper is actually stiff enough for most purposes. The hardest part was definitely the filing the tubes to the right profile, and then soldering, because if you get it too hot, the solder will just drip out the other side. And so, yeah, you have to make sure the two profiles are quite close fitting.
This part was a bit rough, but I don't know, it kind of works, I guess. Printed some spacers to make sure it sits far away enough as clearance for the cable. Actually, it could probably even be a bit closer. Yeah, this rack is ridiculously long. But also I didn't want to weld or whatever, braze, I don't know what you call it, solder pipes, copper pipes. I just 3D printed these, and then it holds it quite sturdy. Yeah, I mean, not much to report. Just secured one bolt, clamps this tight. It's TPU again, so it's like indestructible. This was pretty basic. Hole, and then TPU spacers again. Yes, love TPU.
But it's actually been pretty useful. You can kind of see me carrying this giant toolbox that I got for free recently, and it's kind of hilarious. One other thing I designed was the brake lever hoods. I found a version online that was kind of similar, but in the end I had to just make my own, and it took 8 iterations to get it right. I also printed off some small spacers to reduce the rattle in the lever.
One other thing I added was also this rear rack that I stole off an abandoned bike that was in front of our flat for like 2 years. And that's the bike build done. I'll just talk a bit about how it rides. So I do think the frame is probably too big for me. I probably fit a 56 better, at least with this geometry. And I'd say the shifting isn't super smooth, but that might be due to the mix of road and mountain bike parts, and also a new chain of some slightly worn out components. And I did have a slight issue with chain slipping, but replacing the jockey wheel helped a lot for that. I also really wanted to replace these pedals, but it was outside of the budget. And I don't really know what I want to do with this bike since I don't really have space for it, and it kind of overlaps too much with my Brompton. Like if I got like a 90s mountain bike and made it kind of an off-road gravelly type bike, it would have been kind of a keeper, but as is, I'm not sure I want to keep it. And if I sell it, I don't know if I can include the rack because I can't really guarantee its structural integrity. Might just fall apart. So yeah. And if you're watching this around end of February, early March, and the voting's still ongoing, please check the link in the description to vote for my entry. You'll have to vote for all the entries as well, but just keep clicking. And if you don't see mine, that probably means I've already been kicked out or lost. Anyways, thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe so I can make more content and videos.